Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. So in this video I hope to dispel 3 major myths or misconceptions, if you will, about forge welding. So myth number 1 is flux, or more importantly, the use of flux. It is not always imperative that you have to use flux to get a good forge weld. In the example of forge welding 2 mild steel pieces together, it is not important to take and flux the pieces before you take and weld up a joint. People use way too much flux. They get big old palmfuls and throw a bunch of flux like that and drown a joint in flux. And what that does is it ends up preventing a weld from sticking eventually, or for the most part, because what you get is you get that flux that gets trapped in the joint and it doesn't actually flux the piece. The way flux works is through capillary action. That means you put a little bit on the surface, it melts, and as it melts, the capillary action pulls it through the joint of the material, therefore fluxing the material. Also, this is a boric kind of acid. It's an acid, okay? So it's an acidic nature type flux. And if you don't believe that, if you put this on this 20 mule team borax, this laundry booster boric acid, if you take and you put this on the piece and you sniff right above the steel where the vapors are coming off of this melting, it'll really tingle or sting your nose. Again, it's an acid. Strong acids will do that. They're very astringent. Now, that's not a super strong acid. It's a very mild thing, but that is one of the myths that you need flux. There's certain cases that you do need to use flux, and that is usually in the cases when you're trying to join high carbon steel to a mild steel. It usually goes a little bit better if you add flux. The reason for that being is it lowers the melting point ever so slightly of the mild steel to match the melting point of the high carbon steel bit, and it will help hammer the pieces together. If you're taking and forging wrought iron, however, wrought iron is self-fluxing. Mild steel, again, the melting points are the same, so that's irrelevant. The only time I use flux on mild steel is when blending in the toes of scarves. You don't need it if you've got a good high heat and your scarves are made properly. You won't need to take and do that at all if you can pin them in. But on more complex joints, that's where flux can be applied very lightly, not liberally. We're not drowning the piece in flux, and you can apply that to great effect. So that's myth number 1, if you will, flux. Myth number 2 is clinker. I've got a piece in here. This is at the end of the day fire. This is about 8 p.m. in the evening. I've got a sample piece in here that I'm going to grab out of the fire, and I am going to forge weld this piece. Now, there's a big giant clinker in the bottom of this forge. I don't have any flux on it whatsoever, but I got my pieces of steel in there, and they're all super hot, a little too hot. The one piece was. It was getting a little bit too much air to it, so it was starting to burn a fuzz. We'll switch these tongs for a different pair here real quick. That'll grip that piece a little bit better. We're going to bring the pieces up to high heat, and then we're going to go after it. I'm going to make this weld here. Again, this is with a clinker-filled fire. Now, if you see how those pieces were taking and going like that, that's what was preventing it. Do you see how they were burning? The fire is not one of them. Let me put it back in, and let me get this re-hot. The oxygen in the fire is what's burning it. It's not the temperature. The oxygen in the fire has created an excess amount of scale. That excess amount of scale has prevented the weld. So I'm going to stick this back in here. I'll bring this up to heat, hopefully a little slower this time, and I will show you what I mean. And this will bring me to my last point, and I'm going to pull out the fire for you all in this video demonstration. But this is going to help bring me to my last point. My last point about my last myth is that forge welding is somehow magical. That means some days it happens, other days it doesn't. Some days you can weld and other days you can't. That would have never flown in a chain maker's or some place that, you know, like a shipyard where they needed to weld up stuff for a living. That type of answer, oh, well, you know, it just, well, today's my day. Earl can weld today and Earl couldn't yesterday. That would never apply, okay? That would never fly in a place that would have a chain maker's. Like in a shipyard or something like that. Now those pieces are lightly welded, but you can see they are stuck together. I can throw that back in the fire and we can weld that down yet one more time. But the point is this has got a giant clinker in here. The point's not whether I can weld it, the point is that there's a giant clinker in there and it didn't inhibit the weld. Again, forge welding is a fundamental practice of a blacksmith and should be able to be done by anybody who is a blacksmith. You should be able to take and do a forge weld. They're not that difficult. They take a little bit of practice, but they can be done by all. So now I'm going to exhibit a case where you would want some forge welding flux. So right here I'm trying to weld up this seam that's been opened up here. I want to weld further up. You would take a little bit of flux, you would drop it right in there ever so lightly, not a bunch, we're talking a small sprinkle, and then you would close this up ever so slightly just to prevent dirt from getting in there. And now we can weld that up a little higher. So back to my point. It's a mechanical process. It's just like you saying that you can't draw out a taper for nothing one day, but another day you're good at tapers. Same thing, I can't punch a hole on some days, but once a week I can punch a hole. Or in other days you can punch a hole. Or the weather's not right, or I woke up in a bad mood. None of those have anything to do with your forge welding technique. And the reason why I state all this the way that I'm doing it right now is those are common myths, those three myths: too much flux, clinkers inhibits welds, and that forge welding is somewhat magical, or somehow, you know, it's just left up to the creator of the universe there, whether you're getting your welds done for the day or not. Those are all falsehoods. None of those have anything to do with anything. Forge welding is a very mechanical process, and if you prep your scarf joints right, if you make sure you have a decently clean fire, you make sure you don't have too much oxygen in your fire like I have right now, and you are quick and expedient to the anvil to do your forging, you will be able to get your welds each and every time. It's that simple. It's that simple, fellas. Each and every time you will be able to weld. No problem. It is a basic forging operation. Now, I make it look a lot more basic than what it will seem to you because I've been doing this for a little over a decade now. So that makes it seem a lot easier than what it is initially. But you can do this very same exercise, get the very same results with a dirty fire, with not perfect conditions, and you can get a weld. The point of this demonstration, which I hope will encourage you, is that if you can't get welds at your shop, the problem is not you. The problem is the steps are out of order and they can be fixed. So whether your timing isn't right, your fire isn't right, or maybe it's the process that you're using isn't correct. Going back to the flux there. This is to help you diagnose the reason why you're not able to accomplish a forge weld. And as soon as you understand how to diagnose yourself and say, hey, okay, I'm not getting this to weld, why not? You go through the process. Okay, well, what's this doing? Well, what's that doing? Well, does that matter? Well, does that matter? If you say, nope, check, I got that correct. Check, I got that correct. Yes, my pieces are scarfed correctly. Yep. Yes, my fire is getting hot enough. Yes, my pieces are coming out burnt. Uh-oh. Stop right there. Why are they coming out burnt? They're coming out burnt because you have too much oxygen flow coming through your fire. So you need to put a reduced oxygen environment when you put your pieces in. That means you bring your fire up to the temperature you want your steel to be, which is that really bright welding heat, and then you kill the airflow or reduce the airflow. So it's a reducing fire when you put your piece in there. And then that will allow your pieces to come up without overscaling or burning in the fire itself. You may have to bump on and off the electric blower, or if you've got a hand crank or a bellows, you might have to give it a few extra little cranks or pumps of the pump handle for the bellows to get it to that final welding temperature. But yes, you can weld, and this is a definable process that you can diagnose whether what it is that's going wrong. Say you get through all that, it's not burning, everything's right, but you're going to the anvil and you still can't get it to weld. Take quick note of how long it takes you. Put a camera, your cell phone, or something, right there, I've got a camera pointing at you. Yes, you. Put that and film yourself and stop filming. And then watch it back on the replay and count how many seconds it took you to go from the fire to the anvil to forge weld. And 9 times out of 10, you're just being too slow. From the fire to the anvil and weld, you're coming in too slow. You're coming from the fire, you're setting the piece down, boom. Now I'm going to forge on it and weld it, right? And by that time you pick that up and do that at that speed, you've done lost the welding heat. So you've got to come out quick to the anvil, blow. Quick to the anvil, blow. Quick to the anvil, blow. So you guys can pick that up. So you pull it out, blow. Quick to the anvil, blow. So it should be about that quick if you want to play this back or watch the seconds on that to take and make a forge weld. So to demonstrate the clinker theory, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the clinker for all you waiting on this. To pull out your clinkers, you got to let the fire cool somewhat. So this way the clinker will solidify on the bottom. I slide down the bottom. I have a whole video on this of how to do clinkers, how to remove clinkers from fire pots. And I'm going to show this to you all right now. That whole thing's a clinker. That is what I was forge welding in. That exact thing right there. A big chunk right there just fell out of the middle of that. So that whole giant piece was in the bottom of my fire pot, and I was still able to forge weld. Now, if you let it get that bad, it's going to make your life a lot more of a pain to get a forge weld. So go ahead and pull the clinkers if you feel that it's gotten that bad, and that will help you greatly. And it'll reduce the amount of oxygen you need in the fire to actually get your forge weld. Anyways, that's it for today. thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions about forge welding, drop them down in the comment section down below. I'd be happy to answer them for you. I may not answer them in the comment section, but I will make another video if we get enough of the same type comments or questions. I'll answer what I can in a future video. So, without further ado, I'm going to call it for the night. I'm going to go ahead and shut down my forge, but I really hope you guys are watching this in the morning. This is just a nighttime recording right now for me, but I'm going to call it quits for the evening. I want to thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and you would like to take and support the channel, please consider sharing this video around with your friends. It greatly helps out. So without further ado, God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.